Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all of the support, the kind messages, all the things that you've sent to me personally, all the things that you've sent to the show. I really do appreciate all of those. Keep those coming. Love hearing from you guys and love hearing your questions and all the suggestions you have for topics. I like this topic because it's something that every program cares about, whether you're, a youth coach all the way up to the collegiate or beyond level, and the topic of like hard work and what that means. And what I love about it is that everybody can kind of have their own definition and their own spin on it, but we as coaches can kind of learn from each other based on each other's interpretation of what that term means. And so I thought this would be a real fun topic to kind of dive into with my guest here as she kind of breaks down with her and her staff how they kind of define what hard work looks like for their program. So we'll kind of get into things of player development. We'll talk about practice. We'll talk about, the learning and understanding that comes with the game, relationship building, a whole bunch of stuff that kind of all fits under that hard work umbrella. So I'm very happy to be joined today by the assistant women's basketball coach at Millikan University, which on a personal note, I'm very excited about because it may be one of the few guests I've had who coaches at a university I've actually been to. I don't think I've been in the gym, but I have been at the university itself. Very happy to be joined today by Coach Mallory Liebl. Coach, again, appreciate being able to have you on and talk to you. How you doing today?
I am good. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I really appreciate it.
Coach, let's go ahead and jump right in and start with your basketball journey and your coaching journey and talk us through where this great game has taken you and ultimately how you ended up at Millikan.
Yeah, I played basketball through high school. And I decided that I wanted to get into coaching right out of high school. So I didn't go play in college, but started coaching an eighth grade feeder program team while I was in college. And I loved it. I love the just learning, coaching and all that. I think it was a really good spot to start. Once I graduated from college, I moved on and I became a JV head coach at a all girls school in Milwaukee. And then I also coached a club for 10 years in the Milwaukee area. I coached from seventh graders up into juniors in high school. So just kind of depended on the season. And then after I was a JV head coach for 4 years, I was a varsity head coach for 8 years in Brookfield, Wisconsin. And then after that, I went to a JUCO, Bryant and Stratton, for 2 years, which was in Milwaukee. And now this is my first season at Millikan. With Millikan, it was just a really good opportunity. I knew the reputation of Coach Hammer, who is our head coach. She came from UW Whitewater, which very successful program. They're always, in contention for the NCAA tournament. She was the associate head coach there. And just our Wisconsin ties. I knew a lot about her, and I thought this would be an awesome place to get, learn even more from her and just get that experience of D3 basketball and kind of continue to climb up the ladder a little bit.
So a couple of questions with your journey that I'm curious about. As you talked about kind of the ladder climb, so to speak, what have you noticed, that's different at this level that you're coaching at now that may be a little bit different from how things were done at, the previous stops that you were at?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it is probably the basketball IQ part, as
Mm-hmm.
you obviously as you get old, like you get the older groups and whatnot. But I think the game overall has changed in my however many years of coaching. About 15 years now. So I would love to at some point go back and to coaching like 8th grade just to see what that is like now compared
Yeah,
to 15 years ago.
right.
I think, I know we'll get into this later, but the relationship building aspect is a little bit different um, at this level. And just for me personally, it's my full-time job now, which is
Hmm.
awesome. When I was coaching at the other levels, I had to have a full-time job on top of coaching.
Right.
So that's been a really big um step up for me.
No, yeah, no, for sure. Being able, I imagine, to be able to dedicate, a lot more time and a lot more effort to something like that probably makes you, that much better as a coach or that much more attentive, being able to, focus completely on the game.
Yeah, it is awesome. I love it. I love that I get to wake up every day and go do something that I love to do.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, Coach, because this is something that I'm personally passionate about as somebody who coaches on the girls' side, and me and a lot of my peers in the girls' basketball side here in the Phoenix area are mostly guys, and it's something that we talk about often about wanting to get our girls who we coach to then become coaches themselves and kind of give back to the game and be able to still stay involved in it that way, but some success and maybe, not as much success in some ways as we want. I was just curious about what inspired you to really get into coaching. How did you know at such a young age that you wanted to, give back to the game in that way?
Yeah, I so my older sister played high school basketball at Pius High School in Milwaukee, and she had a coach who was like a legendary high school coach. Um, and I got to watch that for a couple of years. I was in 6th grade and 7th, 8th grade when she was in high school, and I love the game. I love learning the game. I love teaching the game. And with her coach, I just saw how he taught the game and was able to develop his players, build those relationships with the players. Um, and for me, I was one of those rare players who I love to coach more than I love to play the game.
Mm,
Um, and it was just a really eye-opening thing for me to see that where you can be really successful coaching, um, but you can also still have really good relationships with players and all that.
no, that's awesome, and I think that that's something that I talk about my kind of my coaching circles a little bit is about if we you know create these experiences that are really memorable and really enjoyable and help our players kind of fall in love with the game, not just have great experiences with it obviously, but also learn about the game and like fall in love with kind of some of the nuances of the game and that mental side that hopefully that can kind of rub off on them, be like, ooh, I kind of want to get on that other side of coaching it too, and being on that side of things. So fingers crossed that we have some success there and getting some future alumni girls out there on the in the coaching ranks.
Oh, for sure. I know I've got a couple former players that are now coaching, and I love to follow along with them and see what they're doing, and just the difference that they're making, not
Hmm.
only in the game of basketball, but their players' lives. And um it's really fun to see that. I love to see that there's more females in coaching.
Yeah.
Obviously female sports are becoming even more relevant now. And it's just been a really cool thing to see, especially when you think of all the females and the women that um, were the trailblazers of
Mm.
that. It's just really cool to see that kind of continue on.
No, definitely. No, 100% agreed. Coach, before we get into our topic, I know this is always something that a lot of guests, or excuse me, listeners, and maybe guests too, but listeners are always curious about. And of course, since you are at the collegiate level, um, things that make players stand out to colleges at the collegiate level, things that make players recruitable or get on the radar of collegiate programs. And I was curious your thoughts on what are some of the things, and I know that there's all types of levels, obviously, of college basketball, but in a general sense, what are things that high schoolers and younger players can be doing to kind of get themselves out there and put themselves on these different colleges' radars?
Right. Biggest thing I would say is they need to be able to advocate for themselves. Whether that is going to their coach and their high school coach or club coach, talking about kind of what they're looking for, what their goals are, and then being able to express that to coaches, reach out to coaches. Obviously, there's a lot of players out there, that are recruitable. You're not gonna, as a coach, you're not gonna be able to find every single one of them, but we definitely have a certain type of player that we want in our program. And I think part of that is players who know what they're looking for
Mm-hmm.
one. Um, Everybody obviously says they want a good culture and all that, but I think style of play, things like that need to be the right fit on both sides. Um, but just being an advocate for themselves, and then when they do put themselves on the radar, it's so much about, it's not just how many points they can score or how many rebounds they get, but a lot of what we look for is how are they, for one, as teammates, two, that goes into being a good teammate. Are you talking? Are you communicating on the floor? Are you hustling? Are you getting the 50-50 balls? Just all those little things are going to add up, and it's doing like the dirty work, I call it, to help your team be successful in whatever way that is. And you're not always going to have an on night shooting, but what can you do to make a difference and impact the game in other ways? Um, and so it's been really fun going from the high school level to the college level in the recruiting side of things. Just seeing so much basketball and um, seeing how different players do certain things, high school coaches do certain things. Um, but it is so much just about knowing what you want, knowing what you're looking for, and then finding the right fit.
I really like that part that you mentioned about players like advocating for themselves because I talked to a couple college coaches who are around me in the area and they bring up exactly what it is that you bring up about how they're really impressed by those players who like really craft like personal messages and really can like speak to what the actual collegiate program is doing and how they feel that they might be a good fit versus like just blasting a generic message to everyone. I think that kind of like extra legwork and really putting yourself out there, but also, taking the time to make sure that the program that this, high schooler is looking for is a good fit for them too. It really goes a long way, and it's really cool to see those stories of like those players who can like really, speak for themselves and speak on their own behalf, but also, advocate as to why they'd be a good fit for a particular program. It's really cool to see that level of maturity in these young players.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And there's, we're really lucky. We come across a lot of kids that um are mature, and they know what they want. They're super personable, which is really enjoyable conversations.
Hmm.
And again, seeing that excitement in these players to want to go and pursue their dreams and their goals. Um, and again, just knowing what they want, what they're looking for. And I think it says a lot too about just how, again, female sports is developing, becoming more popular. These athletes now are given so many opportunities, and it's really cool to see them take advantage of it.
No, definitely well said. Uh, I feel like if we're going to start with this conversation about, defining hard work for your program, um, I wanted to start, Coach, with an element that I know you're really passionate about, which is player development. And of course, uh, for players to develop, obviously hard work is definitely required and entailed. So I wanted you to kind of talk about, what goes into player development for you as a coach and how do players kind of learn what hard work really means in terms of putting in that hard work to get better? How do you kind of make sure that the players understand the expectation of the work they're going to need to be putting in, not just with you, but on their own in order to really develop to where they could be?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I do think it's about communicating what your expectations are, as far as putting in that work to get better. It's not just about the 2 hours that you're at practice. There's so much more that goes into that. And I think a lot of times athletes might think that they're working hard and they're putting in the work, um, until they have those expectations and those ideas of what you need to be doing. Because again, I don't think necessarily that you could put in 6 hours of work a day on your game, but how intentional are those 6 hours? Um, so working hard doesn't necessarily mean spending even more time on it. Um, but when you do get to a point where you can put the work in, you can feel confident after you've left a workout that you've gotten better. With the development part of it, it's so much of just realizing what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, where you can get better. And when you do that, um, and you continue to see your progress, see your improvement, you're gonna want to be putting that work in to get better, and take advantage of those opportunities. But as a staff, it's on us to lay out those expectations, have open conversations with our players about what they need to be doing, um, how they can get better, how they can continue to improve certain parts of their game. Um, because we essentially, as coaches, need to be teachers of the game. And
Hmm.
not every player is going to come from a high school program that was successful, um, or maybe they had a different coach every single year. So I think just
Yeah.
being able to meet players where they are, um, and be able to expand their game that way.
Is it just thinking about the the leap that these players are going to be making in terms of the competition they're facing and what's expected of them at a collegiate level, is it um, difficult for your players sometimes to kind of catch up to the speed of the game? If it is difficult, like how do you kind of get them, ready, especially for maybe some of those younger players to really be ready for what's expected for them at the collegiate level? Because I imagine that's for some of them that's going to be quite a leap in terms of like competition and where their skills are going to need to be in order for them to be competing at that level.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it is, you can definitely see the difference when we get back on campus to start school and preseason workouts and all that. You can spot a freshman from a mile away. um, just as far as even in the weight room, we have two freshmen on our team this year. One of them also plays volleyball, so she wasn't part of our preseason workouts, but our one freshman that was, just even in the weight room, it's like night and day now from where she was at to where she is now 6 months later. Um, and it is, like you said, it's a big leap, it's a big jump. Everything's different. The speed of the game, the physicality of the game, uh, how you prepare for the game, how you prepare for practice, taking care of your body. All of that is goes into it. And it's not
Hmm.
like high school where you show up for an hour and a half for practice and you're there 30 minutes before the game starts, you do warm-ups and now you're playing. Um, there's just so much more prep that goes into it. And I think for us it's understanding that they're not going to be at a certain level right away, being patient with them. And again, just having that open line of communication, talking about what might be, what might they be struggling with, um, and being there for them. Because a lot of times, too, this is kind of off topic, but
Hmm.
these players are away from home for the first time.
Yeah.
And that in itself can be really difficult. So I think just understanding and remembering that there's a human aspect to it also, um, and helping them get through that transition while also helping them be more comfortable and confident on the court.
Yeah, because for you bring up a good point though about how in high school, right? I'm sure players are feel pretty comfortable in the environment that they're in. They're near their house and everything like that, and here they are in some cases, maybe hundreds to thousands of miles away. Like everything might be, uncomfortable for them. They might not have that familiarity or that, that comfort zone that they would have necessarily when they were in high school. So that's, I imagine, is a huge adjustment as well.
For sure. And it is. And again, we talked about, finding the right fit
Hmm.
um, as a player. Kind of goes back to that too, is what feels like home for you when you do go visit and you are around the team, you're around the coaches, um, and really getting a feel for how you'd fit in there. But is this a place where you feel like you can be comfortable and be in the best environment? Obviously, as a student first, but as a student athlete, is it somewhere that you can see yourself being successful, but also being able to adjust to the change, um, and be able to get the best out of yourself as a basketball player, not just for yourself, but for your teammates as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in. It's easier when you're in high school and you just go to the high school that's near you and you can just,
Yes,
go do that versus like having to put in a lot more thought and, decision making, obviously. Because I think that, going back to a previous point that we mentioned, is that for as much as colleges are recruiting players, I think players also are recruiting colleges, and they need to be asking questions and making sure that they're also, doing their own homework and being diligent and thoughtful about it, because, they got to make sure that the university or college fits their needs just as much as, the player is going to fit that program's needs.
exactly. Yep, that's exactly it.
What is the kind of definition, I guess there's so many different definitions of kind of like a hardworking program at Millikan. What does a hardworking like practice look like? How is that kind of defined about, getting a good hardworking practice in, and kind of take us through what a spectator might be seeing if they were to kind of walk into a practice and see what was going on.
First of all, it really does start with the energy in the gym. Um, you don't want to walk into a gym during a practice where it's not high level, it's not intentional. Um, we're just very much a program that we again, we want to be able to be as efficient as we can within a practice. We're not the kind of program where we're going to be practicing for hours and hours. But when we are in the gym, we expect our players to be high energy, to be talking, to be playing with that passion, but also in a space where they are putting themselves out of their comfort zone a little bit, uh, to get better and also push their teammates to be better. So a lot of times we talk about being able to come into practice and be able to turn your brain off from everything else and just really be locked in and focused on what we're trying to accomplish, whether that's 3 weeks away from our first game or a day away from a game in the middle of season. We want our practices to always be consistent. So if you came to our first practice of the season, and you came to our last practice of the season, we want there to be that consistency there where there's no lull in practice or a day where nobody's focused. And that's really difficult
Yeah.
because there are so many things in the outside world that really do impact a player or a person's day, their mood, whatever it is. So for us, it's just so much about that mental toughness, and being able to get in the gym, get that work in. However, whatever that looks like for each program is obviously different. But like I said, for us, it's so much about the energy level. Um, is there that passion there, or are players just kind of going through the motions, um, just to get through it and not really have any intention behind it?
So in those practices then, is there like a lot of different like things happening? Are there like a lot of quick transitions between one thing to a next? Is there like a lot of, different things happening at once? What does it kind of like what does it kind of like look like in terms of like the different things that are kind of be happening?
Yeah, for sure. We do have our practices planned out pretty much to the minute.
Hmm.
And we like to be able to get from one thing to the next thing and be able to, again, stay mentally locked in. So we're really big on, there's not a lot of downtime in our practices. It's going to be, again, high level, high energy. Our coaches coach with a lot of energy because it starts at the top. We have to come in and be the energy givers to get a practice going. So yeah, we'll go from, a half court drill to a full court drill. And it's always interesting to see how kids and players can adjust to something that maybe is more skill development. And then we get into, let's say, like transition offense. So how do we adjust that level of play and that level
Mm-hmm.
of intensity compared to when we're just doing something that's, again, maybe just at a basket and it's not getting up and down the court. Like, can we focus and not make so many mental mistakes once we're in the full court setting? So our head coach, Coach Hammer, is very big on, and I'll keep saying it, just the intent. Are we
Yeah.
actually doing something that is game like, game speed, and what it's bringing our players so that when we do get in games, they're confident in what they're doing because you're not walking on the court during a game. So if you're walking on the court in practice, that's probably not going to go over all that well.
Yeah, right. There's a certain baseline expectations that it seems like everyone has to be held to and everyone's held accountable to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's very like I said, it's very interesting when you come into a program with a new coaching staff.
Hmm.
Um and realizing that maybe your expectations are a little bit different than the previous coach, and not in, a better or worse way or anything like that, but every coach is
Yes.
different with different expectations. And whether you're a freshman or you're a senior, for us, the expectation is always going to be the same. Um, but just understanding that you really is at any age level, you really have to like lay out your expectations. And people might not understand this, but part of the expectation that you have to lay out is like not walking during practice from one drill to the next drill, or when you're coming off the court at halftime, you're not walking off the court. um just little things like that, I think, speak volumes about a program that spectators can see. um and you have to have those standards to hold your players to and keep them accountable, um because you're just trying to be as consistent as you can with your program. Um, and if they're not meeting those expectations, it just I think it hurts the culture of the program.
Yeah, and those things that you mentioned, I think that's kind of really important for new coaching or new coaching staff that comes in, right? Is they have like those expectations and they have the things that they expect from everyone. But I think, anybody who's coached for a long time kind of knows at some point, right, a player is going to test that or see if, you really mean that or they're not going to follow through on those expectations. And then it comes down to, okay, like, was that something that really did matter to you? Is there some sort of consequence or something that's going to happen because that didn't happen? And then everyone kind of knows, okay, those things are really important. Like there is going to be follow through and to know what those things are that matter to you and make sure that, you follow through on any time it's not happening. I think it really sets the tone right away. And it sounds like it has for the staff there at Milliken, like the culture and the tone of whatever those new expectations are have been kind of laid out and every player knows exactly what they are.
Yes, yep, that is for sure. It's again about just that communication piece. Um, and we as coaches can't expect everyone to come in and just automatically know the expectation. So obviously you have team meetings, preseason team meetings, and where you just lay it out. We have an entire binder of our expectations and just kind of lay out what we want our program to be.
Mhm.
And I think that does start with the coaches, and it starts with the people at the top, and then it trickles down to your captains, to your seniors, um, as they need to be locked in with what the coaching staff is asking for, because they're going to be around the team more than the coaches are.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if the captains and seniors aren't on the same page with the coaching staff, that obviously becomes a disconnect. But I think it's just really important that you lay it all out there. And like you said, you have to follow through
Mhm.
on those expectations. And if they're not met, how are you going to handle that? And every coach obviously is different with that as well. Um, so setting the tone right away for us was really important. There's obviously things when you're a new staff, a new head coach, that you learn, and you might say, okay, now I know going into the next season or this off season, this is something that we need to be able to talk about and implement so that moving forward, we can continue to be even better with our
Right.
expectations.
Right. And just put one last point question to you about practices and the concept of how hard work fits into those. Coach, where does competition fit? How competitive are these practices, and kind of what does that competition or competitiveness kind of look like in those practices?
Right. Everything for us is a competition. We, we keep score on the scoreboard. For everyone can see it. Uh, there's this little things that will, even when it's we'll change it up. It's not necessarily always the score like points wise, but did you get 2 stops in a row? Can you get 3 stops in a row? Some days we're more defensive minded than we are offensive minded. So maybe getting 2 stops in a row is going to be worth 2 points, and other days it's going to be, can you get 2 scores in a row, and that's going to be worth 2 points. Or do we are we able to keep a team that wants to drive out of the paint um for an entire possession? That's going to be a point. So
Mm,
it's not even always just when we're going 5-on-5. um it can be a rebounding drill where any offensive rebound is going to be a point, and we're running for those points, or the team that doesn't get as many or doesn't have as high of a score, um they'll be running, or whatever it is. So I think you can't really expect players to be competitive in a game, and just have that like fight mentality in them if it's not something that's expected in games or in
right.
practices.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and again, that's something that not everybody has, that competitive edge to them. Um, and it might again surprise people that it's something that has to be learned sometimes. Um, and we just always remind our players that they need to play with that competitive edge because they need to make each other better every day. And if you're not playing with any kind of competitive edge, you're really setting yourself up for failure and your teammates up for failure, because you're not preparing them for the opponent that is going to come for you.
Yeah, no, I think that idea that you mentioned, right, is like if everything is competitive and your practices are hard and your players are really working at it, in theory, games become just like another thing that they have to do. They're already so used to competition, right? They're already so used to like what it is to, work really hard and compete and battle for everything during a practice that you don't necessarily need to flip a switch or do anything, out of the ordinary to get them ready for a game competitiveness wise, because they already have that mentality to always be competing the second they're on the court, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. I love how you put that. It's where like you're not like what we see in practice is how we're going to play in the game. So it's so much about just having that edge in you. Like, I'm gonna run through a wall for my coaches, for my teammates. And if we don't see that in practice, we're not going to have the confidence that you're going to play like that in a game.
Mm.
Um, it completely translates from practice to a game. Sometimes we'll have, where we feel it's just a really bad practice, low energy, maybe players that make a mistake and they just can't move on to the next play. All those things, they do go into your decision making as far as who you're going to put in the game at crunch time.
Yep.
And that starts in practice 100%.
No, I like that a lot. Awesome. Uh, with the concept of hard work, it also comes into play when it comes to players really having to learn and understand the game and really get a better grasp of the concepts and the things that are happening on the court. And obviously things may get a little bit more complex or a little bit more quicker as players move up to the collegiate level. So I'm curious, how do your players kind of work hard in the sense of learning the game and putting in that meaningful work in film session or coaches meeting? What is that sort of basketball work that isn't on the court? How do they kind of develop, and how do they put in meaningful work in that sense of the game?
For sure. I personally, and this might sound a little crazy, but I personally believe that a player can learn so much of the game from watching basketball, watching college basketball games on TV, listening to what is being said, listening to, just even coaches and huddles when they show that. Um, but if you don't have a sense for certain situations, um, then you don't understand the game enough, because a lot of times when you're in a situation where it's a 3, 4, 5 point game with 2 minutes left, where are you going to be like in your mindset of, okay, this is what I need to do? So part of it comes from that, I think, but a lot of it comes from coaches understanding that they need to teach every part of the game, because you're going to have some players that have really high basketball IQ for a lot of different reasons, and some that they've never really had to think much while they're playing. Um, so we spend a lot of time watching film individually with players, whether it's a lot of times it's of themselves and what in certain situations we're looking for. Um, because I think if you don't correct things with individual players, then it's really hard to put all the pieces together as a whole.
Yeah.
So that's another way we put in that work, but it also has to come from them wanting to watch film on their own, not just our team film sessions, um, and understanding that they need to know player tendencies for the opponent, um, understanding what each team is going to do at the end of a game situation. And that all comes from really studying the game and studying what each opponent's going to do. And nowadays, with the technology and the advancement of technology, um, it's really easy to find the different parts of the game that need to be focused on. You don't have to sit and just watch an entire game to see certain things. So we just really encourage our players to watch film on their own. When we give them their matchups, their defensive matchups, go spend even extra time on those players. So just things like that. But I do think it starts at the top with coaches being able to teach the game and explain the why we're doing certain things, why we're doing certain drills, how everything pieces together. Um, and it just gives players a better understanding of the why.
And in your experience with that, are players, is that something that comes kind of easy to players? I know every player is different. Is that something that takes players a kind of a long time to grasp? In general, how would you say the process is, or how long that process is for players to really start to click on kind of understanding the game and understanding, the different things that they're, seeing on film.
For sure. It takes a while. Um, it's and I have a lot of respect for like AAU and club basketball and the coaches. It's a grind, but I think with how much emphasis is put on like club basketball right now is it's I think it hurts players development of like an IQ a little bit because you're just going from game to game and you're not necessarily like scouting for games. Um so I think it takes a little bit longer for players to like develop an IQ with that
Hmm.
because again, they come from a different high school situations. When I was a high school coach, we always watched film, but I we have players that they never watched a minute of film
Yeah.
with their high school team or with their high school coaches. Um, so that becomes a little more difficult because again, they don't understand the expectation of putting in the extra work. So, like you said, hard work isn't defined just based off of the time you're in the gym,
Hmm.
um, but really getting them to understand the importance of watching film, again, studying tendencies, and it takes a while. And some players, it can take their entire college career to really understand it. Others pick up on it a little bit quicker. I think of the players that can play just freely and without overthinking, um, their basketball IQ and just their ability to make decisions, especially when they're tired, just kind of comes like second nature to them.
It's always interesting, the kind of that balance. And I think that as a coach myself, like I still sometimes struggle a little bit with that balance of wanting to teach, players a lot about the game and really get them to understand a lot of the maybe the tendencies of their opponent, understand the things that they're seeing on the court, give them a lot of information while at the same time also trusting them as players and not wanting them to, freeze up during a game or overthink or try and like, be processing things or be a step slow because their mind is racing 1,000 miles an hour. And like you said, to just be able to kind of play and, make decisions based on what they see, on the court. And so I think that that to me is kind of also that other level to understanding the game is understanding how to kind of apply all the things that you learn in film and all those things versus also trusting, your own skill set and trusting what it is that you're seeing on the court as well and being able to make decisions. I think that's kind of that other evolution of it, which is definitely takes a while.
Yes, it does. It definitely does take a while. And I think just finding the balance of watching yourself to be better, um, watching yourself play within, your system and with your teammates, and then the aspect too, again, of like the scout film.
Hmm.
Um, it can be overwhelming. It can be a lot, but I think just being able to, like you said and I said, is feeling confident that no matter what situation you're going to be put in, you're ready for it because you've put the work in the gym, you've put the work in when it comes to watching film, being just developing yourself, your mind, um, especially when you're tired, it's the end of the game, and you have to be able to make good decisions.
Yeah.
Knowing that you've seen it, you've corrected maybe mistakes from the past. Um, the best way to learn is to watch.
Yeah. And to what you brought up is like kind of your introductory part of your answer, right? Is like it definitely is something I think as a coach that it takes a lot of time to do, and there's a lot of things that you're trying to do as a coach, whether it's club, AU, high school, or whatever level it is that you're at, that you're trying to do all of the skill work and make sure that your players' skills are where they need to be. But any time that you can spend to really like break down film or help your players kind of understand what's going on and be able to kind of expand their mental side of the game, it just gives them such a huge advantage. And if they have some of that skill set and they have some of that understanding and they do play at a higher level, I mean, I think that that is also going to help them immensely if they come into a collegiate program with kind of that understanding of the X's and O's or understand the terminology and pick things up right away. That could definitely really give them a leg up and a good head start as well.
Oh, that's huge. A 1,000%. I think just even when you're recruiting a player,
Hmm.
laying out that expectation and communicating that with recruits or incoming players, uh, that if they come in, obviously you want them to come in and be in shape and all that, but it's the mental side of things too, and knowing the game is going to give you a leg up. Like you said, you've got to be able to um, come in and understand the game because you're learning so much. Um, I mean, we have a whole lot of just offensive sets that you have to be able to pick up on, and you have to know it. And that goes back to the practice aspect of showing in practice that you know what we are doing. And if you're able to pick up on that at a pretty fast pace, you're going to be putting yourself in a really good position to come in and make an impact right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, huge leg up to have that mental side really strong for sure. Coach, I want to ask about the role that, relationship building plays in getting the most out of your players. If you want your players to work really hard and, get the most out of them, really maximize, their ability and their talent, um, how important is relationship building? And for you as a coach, how do you go about, cultivating these meaningful relationships where you get to know them not just as players, but as people as well?
Yeah, for sure. I truly believe that a player's only going to work as hard, like for you as a coach, as they feel respected, trusted, and cared about um, off the court. So we talk a lot about with our, especially being a new staff early on, was we know and we understand that trust takes time. And that's not just coaches trusting players, but it's also players trusting coaches and
Mm,
having that level of respect. And you really can't learn um, that trust and build that trust if you aren't being intentional about getting to know a player on the court, obviously, but also off the court. There's so much that, again, these young adults go through in life that you really have to understand kind of where they're from, and every player is going to be different as far as their background, how they can be coached, how they want to be coached, what they respond to, what they don't respond to, um, and that all is, in my opinion, based off of the relationship that you have with them. I need to learn how this player is going to respond to a certain coaching style, or maybe one player needs to be kind of pulled aside and talked to one on one. Maybe one player wants to get totally chewed out, and that lights a fire in them. Um, but it really does start with the relationship off the court. And to me, that's one of my favorite things about coaching is building those relationships. And I just the other night was talking with a player that I coached as a JV coach. She's now married with a kid, and those relationships are always really special because you see them grow as people, and
yeah.
then all of a sudden it's like, wow, they're these adults doing so many great things in their life. And a lot of that started because of who they are is because they were an athlete. um, and you just hope that you're making some kind of impact on their life for the rest of their life. But I think just in those transformative years, whether it's high school or college level, they maybe don't always have a role model or a mentor or somebody to go to that they trust. So it's kind of a long answer, but there's so much that goes into it to be able to get your players to perform on the court and know that they're cared about and loved regardless of what kind of stats they're putting up.
And I imagine, I face this at the high school level in my own way, and I imagine obviously you face this as well, where you're pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing, obviously for these players to perform to a certain level, and you want to get the most out of them, and you want that hard work out of them, but as you kind of alluded to earlier, these players are in a very pivotal moment in their life, right, where they're going to be graduating, they're going to be going off in the world and doing all the things that they're going to do. For some of these players, like their career, for a lot of them, I imagine, if not all of them, pretty much their career of playing basketball is going to be done. This thing that they've been doing their whole life, and they're moving on to this different chapter where basketball is no longer going to be as big of a focal point as it was before. So, all of these other things that I'm sure you as a coach are, talking through with your players, and that they have going on in their life, you have to be really aware of all these things, and keep those in mind when you're, pushing your player to, be the best basketball player they can be as well.
Absolutely. It is. It's a very, I think, fine line that you kind of walk because you you obviously want to be as competitive as you can be. You want to be you want to win
Hmm.
also. Um some of that with coaching, it kind of goes with your livelihood, but at the end of the day, the players are humans.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that human aspect, then you're really doing a disservice to not only your players but to yourself as well. And there's players that might not they might not love you as a coach, and that's okay. Not every single player that comes to your program is going to want to stay in touch with you 20, 30 years later. And I think that's normal in life. Like there's just some people maybe you come across that personalities are different or they don't click, but no matter who comes through your program as a coach, I feel like there is responsibility there to be there for them regardless of playing time, regardless of if you have a really, good connection with them, a strong connection. Uh, and just again, it's such a huge piece to what coaching is and what being part of sports is all about. Um, you want to have those relationships with your coaches, with your players, with your teammates. And I think that makes the experience even more enjoyable.
Mm.
But how do I expect a player to want to run through a wall for me if I'm just not caring about them as people?
Yeah, if all you do is just harp on them as players, and I think that I think players know if a coach is just looking out for their win-loss record, or just focused on basketball versus caring about the person themselves. I think that becomes really obvious, and when you have a team that's bonded together because the coach cares about them as people, and asks about them, and asks about their career, and what's going on in their personal life and their future and everything, like the way that that team comes together and plays for each other is much different than a coach who doesn't do those things.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And a lot of it too is um, you know, I'm a little bit older now than I was when I first started coaching. But even when I was like JV coach and I'm 22 years old and players are what, like 15, 16,
Yeah.
um, you learn how to draw that line of I'm not your friend, I'm your coach, but
Hmm.
I'm always going to be there for you if you need something. Um, because you have to have that certain level obviously of respect, but I think as I've gotten older, um that's changed a little bit because I'm not like, they're close to their age anymore.
Yeah.
Um so just the different like kind of relationship and bond you can have is a little bit different, because especially as you get to like the college level, because they are more mature. And they can separate, okay, we're just going to be, joking around about something. And now it's time for you to turn it on and be a basketball
Be
player.
on it. Yeah,
Yeah. So
definitely.
to me, like I said, I think it as a coach, it wouldn't be as enjoyable if you didn't have those relationships off the court with your players.
For sure. Uh, One last question, Coach, before I hit our concluding segment, and I think that this is kind of a spin-off to what it is we just talked about. But I was curious about, for a team to work really hard, they also have to love each other as teammates, and they got to be trusting each other. There's got to be that camaraderie there. They got to have that ability to know that that each one has each other's back. And so I was just curious about whether it's now at Milliken or previous stops you've been, things that coaching staffs have done and or that you have been a part of that have really worked on you know teamwork, bringing players together, and really forging those kind of bonds as teammates.
For sure. Part of it, I think, comes from your team leaders. So whether it's captains, your leadership team, or whatever it is. Not everybody's just a natural leader. So I've always believed that coaches need to kind of show what leadership is. So we always talk about um, spending time with your teammates outside of the gym to connect with them, bond with them. You don't have to be best friends with everybody, obviously, but you do need to try to have that respect, have that friendship, and just know that the person standing next to you is gonna have your back.
Mm.
So we try to do some team bonding once a month. Sometimes the coaches are there, sometimes they're not. Um, but we don't want to ever force team bonding either. I think early on in the season, it's nice to for coaches to kind of set things up a little bit. But as the season goes on, it's fun to hear about our players choosing to spend time together. Um, but it starts to in practice where like you're in the thick of things together. Um, you're putting in that work, you're pushing each other, and when it comes down to it, you know that you can trust that those people in that locker room with you.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love that part that you mentioned about how it's not where teammates have to be like friends with everybody, right? I think
Mhm.
that's an unrealistic expectation that they're gonna be best friends and everything like that. But there is to be that certain level of, camaraderie and respect, and hopefully they become friends with each other. But it's as a coach, you don't have to, force that on, because that's gonna have some adverse effects. You try to force, everyone to be best friends with each other, because that just isn't realistic or isn't gonna happen.
Exactly. Yep.
To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple of questions that I ask every guest, so I'll go ahead and jump right in here with my first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing our listeners would be able to learn from?
Um, I don't know if there's a specific like instance, but I would say don't be too stubborn where you get in your own way. Being willing to adapt as the game is always changing for one. I'm not too proud to say like I don't know everything, and there's still things to learn. And I always say if a season ends and I haven't learned anything, then I'm doing a disservice to our team, to our players. But when you talk about like the stubbornness part is you might have a game plan going into a game, um, and for whatever reason your game plan isn't working. Maybe you're gonna your plan to play a zone because another team isn't a great outside shooting team or whatever it is. Don't be afraid to have to adapt and adjust if it's what's best for your team.
To wrap up, Coach, with that, that was great. To wrap up, Coach, I also like to give guests what I like to call the 60-second soapbox. You're welcome to go over 60 seconds, though. I just like to put a fun, nice title on things, but I like to use it kind of as like a final thought, a closing message, something that you just kind of leave the listeners with. You could take it any direction you want, basketball wise, coaching wise. It's your soapbox after all. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor and just kind of let you take it from here.
Okay. I biggest thing for me would be if you're in coaching or you want to get into coaching, um, don't be afraid to start at the bottom. Um, put that work in. You want to be able to get to a level wherever that is. If you want to be a varsity head coach or a college coach or whatever it is, don't be afraid to ask questions. Um, don't be too big to maybe start at a lower level. I know I personally have learned so much from each stop that I've had, each level I've coached at. You see things differently when you've been able to hit all those different spots. And don't ever be afraid to like ask questions, to ask for help, or build a really good network of coaches that you trust, that you look up to. uh,
Mm.
and just from that standpoint of, like I said, about always learning. um, I don't believe that even the best coaches know absolutely everything. So don't be afraid to just kind of put yourself out there and try new things and figure out what works best for you and your coaching style. And take pieces of everywhere you've been to make them your own when that time comes.
Awesome. Really, really well put. I really like that a lot. It's a great message to leave with Coach. Coach Liebl, again, thank you so much for coming on here and talking about all these different aspects of hard work and especially how it kind of translates into a collegiate setting. It was a lot of fun getting different insights on everything from, player development, practices, relationship building, film, team bonding, all that stuff. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you and the program are off to such a great start here, kind of on year one with this new coaching staff journey. So look forward to continue to kind of follow where Milliken goes from here. Best of luck going forward, Coach, and thank you so much again for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.